Welcome back, folks. My name's Shane. It's that time of year where I release my annual end-of-year wrap-up for the best and worst guitar products of 2024. This is my 8th one in a row, so if you enjoy the video, please leave a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. Drop a comment below as well. Let us know what your favorite piece of kit was in 2024. Before we get into this video, just a few things I wanted to mention. First up, this isn't just a list of new gear and the stuff that was released in 2024. This is the stuff that I've had my hands on, both new and old, and there's some killer old gear in this list, and some really great new stuff as well, so I hope you like the kind of mix of stuff I've got in here. This video will also have a few news sections as well, so stay tuned for that. And lastly, of course, thank you to the Patreon crew, all the subscribers, and everyone who supports the channel. I should also point out, I'm going to put all of the audio on the In the Blues Tone podcast as well, and this will be in the playlist for that. So if you're not already subscribed on iTunes or Spotify and all that kind of stuff, definitely find it in the Blues Tone podcast. I'll link it down below. Now, I had the opportunity to get a sponsor for this particular video, but I declined because I don't think anyone likes ad read. So again, if you do enjoy this, please share it around, leave a thumbs up. Let's get into it. Let's kick things off with the amplifier list. So I'll go through my favorite amps of the year, starting with one that came out a long time ago, which is the PV Classic 50 loaded with 4 10-inch speakers. Now, if you've ever heard a Super Reverb before, there's a lot of similarities with this and a Super Reverb, and also some differences. So the biggest advantages to the PV Classic 50 here is the price. They're so much less expensive, especially when buying it on the used market. This would cost about 1/3 of the price of a new Super Reverb, at least where I live, and that will vary, of course, but it's a really versatile amp. The clean channel on this is every bit as good as the Fender Super Reverb, except these speakers have more mids, or the voicing of the amp has more mids. So it gives you a really great in the mix sound if you're playing live. I really love it. While we do get a real spring reverb in the Classic 50, it's definitely not on the same level as a Fender Super Reverb, and we don't get tremolo in here. But what we do get in place of that is one of the most usable drive channels. Again, I'm starting to lean towards amplifiers now that have both a great clean channel and an absolutely rockin' drive channel. This is one of those amplifiers where I don't even have to bring pedals. I can get the gain and volume up to about 1 o'clock on the drive channel, and it's the sound that I'm so familiar with. I absolutely love this amplifier. The only main compromise with this amplifier, if you haven't guessed what it is already, it's heavy. It's really friggin' heavy, but again, for the price I paid for it, which was about 12 or 1300 Australian dollars, man, it's so much less expensive than the alternatives, and it's made in the USA. So yeah, great amp. If you find one of these locally, definitely give them a shot. This next amplifier is a digital modeling amp, and I'm going to put this in the best of 2024 for a number of different reasons, but I'm a big fan of the brand NUX. I think they make excellent value amplifiers, but a lot of them have been smaller, like little desktop amps. They also do make a few combos, but they've really stepped it up with this new series, and this is the NUX Mighty 60 Mark II. Now, I've also tested the 40, which I really like, and the 20. The 20 has an 8-inch speaker, the 40 has a 10, and the 60 has a 12-inch speaker. And the beauty of digital modeling amplifiers is you can run them all at lower volumes and still get a really great sound. There's a few reasons why I'm putting this into the best of 2024. First up, it's light, it's loud, it handles pedals beautifully if you don't want to use all the built-in effects. It has an old-school amp design to it as well, aesthetically. So it doesn't look like a Boss Katana. It doesn't look like any of the Fender Mustang amps or the Marshall Codes or anything like that. It's got its own thing going on, and that's what I can really appreciate. Now, there's a few trade-offs with this amp to say, some of the other ones that I've just mentioned, including it doesn't have as many effects and amp models as a lot of the other amps. But you can dial in a sound nice and simply, either by using the Mighty Space Editor, I think it's called, for Android or iOS, so from your phone via Bluetooth, and the amp comes with the Bluetooth dongle. Yes, boss! Or, of course, you can use the free software for your PC or Mac, and it works great. When it comes to overall usability, it's set up very different. There's no on-screen display. There's not a bunch of different potentiometers and pots. You basically set it up using the app, and then you can cycle between banks and presets. It's all color-coded on top of the amplifier, and this is a very unique experience. So you can set this up in any way that works for you. So you can just have a bunch of different presets that you can cycle between via the amp, and then you can make customizations along the way. So if you need more gain, you can turn up the gain control. If you want more reverb, there's a tangible reverb control. What you can't do, though, is turn delays or overdrives on and off. once you've already got something stored. You need to do that via your phone. But once you get a sound that you like, or 3 sounds, you're pretty much done anyway these days. So for me, this works great. I love the fact that it says on the box, designed for external pedals, or something to that extent. And this sounds really great with pedals. It's something that you can definitely take to a jam or even a gig. It's 60 watts. It's got a quality 12-inch speaker, much like the Boss Katana. Really high quality speaker. It's super light. It's easy to get around. If you're looking for something a little bit different, definitely give this one a look. This next amplifier was one that encouraged me to buy a guitar a little while ago, and I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. But this is the Fender 57 Custom Deluxe. This is a tweed amplifier. It's about as simple as it gets. There's no reverb or anything like that. You get a tone control, a volume control, and a few different inputs, and that's it. It's so simple. And this is maybe part of the beauty of the amp. And it's one of those amplifiers that just has this beautiful tone where you don't even really miss reverb. I love reverb. Every amp I own has reverb, but I would happily buy that amplifier at some point in time and just turn it up, and you get this beautiful sound. It's got lots of sustain. It really is a classic. So many people talk about deluxe reverbs. I think people should be talking about the Fender 57 Custom Deluxe. It really is something special. Now, this is handmade in the USA. It's one of those expensive Fender amplifiers, so yeah, get your don't get your credit card out. I was about to say that, but save up for it and buy it. That's the smarter way of doing it. And again, while there's no reverb, once you get this amp up to about even a third on the volume, so at about 10 o'clock or so, it sounds so beautiful. And the further you push it, the dirtier it can get. But the cool thing about it is you can also jump between a few of the different inputs and get more gain if you need it. But this amp is so beautiful to play, and I'll just tell you about my experience with it. So when I first got to play one many years ago, it was 2010, I think, or 2009. I was in San Francisco. I went into a guitar shop, and it's where I purchased my 52 reissue Telecaster. And the sales guy just said casually, yeah, just plug into this little amp over here. And the guitar sounded so good. It's that amplifier. The amp is awesome. While the 57 Custom Deluxe is rated at 12 watts, it's the loudest 12 watts I've ever heard. So it really does throw out a lot of wind. And thanks to its inherent voicing, it'll have no problems cutting through the mix. If you're a Fender Tally or Strat player looking for some of those classic tones, definitely give this one a shot. If you plug into a great amp, the guitar's going to sound great. And I'd never heard a guitar sound as good as that 52 reissue Telecaster the first time I ever plugged into one of these. And testing it again all these years later, I was very impressed. I think if the day ever happens where I pick one of these up, I'll be a happy man. All right, over to an amplifier that I had almost no expectations for, and it was really impressive. And this is the Blackstar Club 40 Mark III. Now, this is one of the most versatile combo amps I've tried, and I'll talk about why. So it's a 40-watt amp, but it also has a power attenuation switch on the front, just to the right-hand side, and you can switch it down to 4 watts. If you're practicing at home, 4 watts is plenty. Some might argue that's too much, but the great news is you can also go out of the back into an audio interface. So it's got that capability as well. But this is a super versatile amp. I was really impressed with the clean channel. The single 12-inch speaker really did sound nice and full. There's a couple of different voicing switches as well. There's one for the clean channel that brings in the gain control, and there's also basically 2 separate voicings or 2 stages for the drive channel. The drive channel can sound a little bit fizzy if you sort of have it set incorrectly, but the beauty of this amp is it gives you so many different tonal options. It has a dial called the IFS, which essentially allows you to switch between or control anywhere between a UK kind of voxy sound all the way through to a big round sort of Mesa or Fender sound. So you can get that really big round sound, or more of a chimey sound having it to the left, or anywhere in between. So it helps you find a sound that's a little bit different. Initially, when I first tested the Blackstar Club 40 Mark III, I thought it was a digital modeling amplifier until I picked it up and I went, oh, this is a full-blown valve or tube amp, and it absolutely is. And I think it's just its versatility will appeal to people. If you're someone who likes to play live, and then you also want to practice at home and you only want 1 amp, 4 watts will be fine in a house. In an apartment, maybe not so much. But the direct XLR recording or the PA outputs on the back allow you to sort of use it in a range of different situations. And this just really surprised me. I used to test Blackstar amps back in the day, and then I didn't test them for years because I didn't have access to them. But I borrowed this from Sky Music, and it was really something special and just something a little bit different. Again, I think the trick, or the thing I'm looking for nowadays, is an amp with a great clean channel and a usable drive channel, and this definitely ticks that box. This next amplifier is another one I purchased in 2024. This is the PV Bandit 112. That's right, I got another one, and this is the Red Stripe edition. So I think I've had 3 or 4 of these amplifiers over the last 17 years. Because I'm an idiot, I should have just kept one, but I keep buying and selling stuff. But this one I plan on keeping. I got it in mint condition in Australia for about $270, which is insane value. One of the most frequently asked questions I get on Instagram or in the YouTube comments is, hey, should I get the Roland Blues Cube or the Next Tone? And I'm like, how about a used PV Bandit? It will save you about 60% and it will arguably sound better. Now, I'm a big fan of the Blues Cubes. I think they're not a bad amplifier, but the Bandit, just value for money and bang for buck, all that kind of stuff. You can't beat them if you get them for a good deal. In Australia, at least, the Blues Cube can retail for up to $1,000, and this cost me $270. So even after replacing the speaker with my preferred speaker for this amp, which is the Texas Heat, it's still cheaper and arguably will sound better. So it's all subjective, but that's just my experience and what I like. So the Texas Heat gives you a fatter sound. It kind of takes off a little bit of the top end, and it's the same speaker that I've got in my Marshall DSL-40CR. There's so many parallels between now my Marshall DSL-40 and the Bandit, and one of which is versatility. You get 2 clean voicings on the Bandit, vintage and modern, which kind of gives you a fatter sound, or you can get that Fender sound on the vintage setting. And there's 3 separate gain stages thanks to a toggle switch for the drive channel. It came with a foot switch, so I can absolutely use this amplifier without any pedals, and we did that recently at the Jam. I had my Red Stripe Bandit, my friend Brian had his Silver Stripe Bandit, and you know how many people complained about the tone? 0. No pedals. So they're extremely usable in the context of a live mix. And sure, they're kind of heavy for a solid state amp, but they're good quality and they're still going strong after 20 years. So if you can find one of these, try find one before the price goes up yet again. This next amplifier was one I tested briefly in a guitar shop many years ago, and it was completely out of my price range. And then I finally got a chance to review one, and it sounded glorious. And this is the Mesa Boogie, or as we say here, Mesa Boogie California Tweed. Now, this is the 20 watt with a single 12-inch speaker version. They also make a 10-inch speaker version. Both sound great, so pick the one that you like the best. This has a Jensen Alnico Blackbird speaker in the back, and it's just a beautiful clean channel. It's kind of reminiscent of a Princeton, but again, it has a fatter sound overall, and I think it kind of stays cleaner. Even though it has a gain control, so you can add a little bit of drive in there, it's essentially a clean amplifier only, and the reverb is something else. It's every bit as good as the best Fender reverbs I've ever heard, so much so you will hardly need to turn it up much. But if you like that big sort of surf sound, you can definitely get it out of this as well. The reverb is just really stunning. I think what really separates this from a lot of other sort of professional smaller combos is you can have it at 20 watts. There's a power attenuation dial on the front, so you can switch it down to 10 or 1 watt, which is perfect for home practice. So this could be your one and done pro amp. It records beautifully, so if you love your great clean tones or you're going to be running pedals into it, you can do it even with the power attenuation on. It's still going to give you a great sound. Now, everything that I saw in the comment section led me to believe that the reliability with these might not be as good as other amplifiers. So just do your research if you are thinking about buying one of these. Nothing went wrong when I was doing my demo or anything like that. There weren't any sort of rattly valves or tubes in the back like I might find on other brands. So yeah, my experience with it was very positive, but definitely do some research on this because it will cost you a small fortune. But again, if you like your clean channel with some of the best reverb you're ever going to hear, this is a really great sounding amp. Up next is a Fender amp, and this again is another hand-wired one. So I was lucky enough to test out the Fender 64 Custom Princeton Reverb. It's got a 10-inch Jensen speaker. It's hand-wired in the US, and it has the best tremolo and reverb combination I've ever heard. Now, I've owned a Twin, I've owned a Super Reverb, a few different Vox amps that have a similar combination, and without question, this is the best. While this amplifier recorded beautifully, and it was a pleasure to play, it had that really punchy and percussive sound. It's got a nice tight sort of low end, it didn't get too flubby or anything like that. I don't think this is loud enough to gig with, and most Princetons I find aren't, unless they've got a 12-inch speaker and maybe they're a slightly larger cab, but this will definitely need to be mic'd up. But if you're in a situation where a Princeton is generally loud enough for the kind of stuff that you do, this is a pretty special amplifier. And again, it's right out of my price range, but it's a really beautiful tone, and you have to sort of play it to experience it. Much like that Tweed amp I was talking about earlier. You just turn them up to the sweet spot, and it really is something special. The hand-wired stuff can be hit and miss for me. I don't often get that enamored by it, but I had to put this in the list because at the time of shooting the video, I said this is one of the best amps of the year. And it absolutely was. If you're interested in checking this amplifier out, what I'll do, I'll link to the video obviously down in the description, but I'll put a few affiliate links down there so you can see how much it is in your part of the world. If you game, it really is expensive. I know this amplifier section's been quite long, but there's one other amp I'm just going to briefly talk about. And this is one that I purchased myself. It came out 14 years ago. That's right, 14 years ago, but I bought one brand new this year, and you might be calling me crazy, but it is the Kemper Profiling Amplifier. This has completely transformed my workflow. Now, this isn't a straight up digital modeling device like a lot of the others. This actually will take a profile of your amplifier and give you that sound back through the XLR outputs directly into your audio interface or PA. So the beauty of this is I can run my Blues Deluxe however I like. I could run a dirt pedal into the front end, and that's the sound that gets captured. So I'm capturing my sound, and I'm not at the mercy of using like digital recreations of these amp synths. So it's my tone, which is awesome. If my tone changes, I can mic up the amp with different mics, get a different sound. But over time, if I need to reprofile my amps, I've got my sound, or the sound that I like at that particular time. It's really transformed my workflow. While the user experience with it leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to the software, it's pretty easy once you know how to set it up. I just don't like menu diving on the unit itself. If you are using the software, it's a lot easier to kind of manage, but it's just the ultimate recording tool. And even all these years later, it's still getting firmware updates, which goes to show you that even 14 years ago, the hardware was more than capable at the time to recreate amplifier tones, but it's still capable now, which is great. Kemper are the best when it comes to firmware support, and 14 years later they're still using the same device. I predict at some point in time this amplifier will have like an iPad screen on it but the internals will be basically the same. While the aesthetics of the Kemper might not be for everybody, it really has transformed my workflow anytime I'm shooting a guitar review, because I can plug straight into it and get the tone of my amps. It's really cool. All right, let's talk about electric guitars. Now, I'm not much of an acoustic player, and since moving to this house, it's been too loud to record acoustic guitars with good quality. So once I move, sometime early in 2025, I'll start bringing back acoustic guitars. But as of right now, we've just tested electrics, and this first one is one of my favorites. And it's one of those brands that either goes completely under the radar or people aren't that interested. So I'd love to know why this guitar brand isn't more popular. This is Reverend Guitars. The guitar I'm talking about is the 6-gun. Now, what makes this unique is, while it's a Strat style electric guitar, slightly different shape, obviously, but we get a P90 in the neck and middle position, and then there's a humbucker in the bridge. Now, this is a great combination because you can get the benefit of having a beautiful P90 in the neck or middle, or you can switch between the combination of neck and middle pickups together. Or, of course, you've got the humbucker if you want to rock out with some drive or high gain tones where sometimes the P90 might buzz a little bit too much. So it's really versatile. We get locking tuners, and overall just a really playable electric. Now, the cool thing that Reverend guitars have that not many other guitars have is the bass contour control, and this allows you to fatten out the frequencies of the pickups or thin them out just by using an additional potentiometer on the guitar. And this is completely passive. It's such a great feature. I know there's a couple of other slight variations of this in other guitars, but these guys, I think, were the OGs of coming up with this sort of design, and it's really musical. So if you want to play like a funk tune, you can kind of thin out the pickups a little bit, and if you want to rock out with a sort of big solo tone, you can fatten them back out. This is a really playable guitar, and again, I'm not sure why Reverend Guitar videos don't get any views. It's one of my worst performing videos of the year, but definitely one of the most fun guitars I've played in 2024. The next guitar I had to put in this list was, of course, the Epiphone Explorer. This is one of the new Inspired by Gibson series. Now, I never had a chance to play a lefty in this series until recently, and everything about this guitar is beautiful. It's nicer than my Gibson Flying V, so if you want to save a few bucks, the Epiphone is really something special. It's got that Carina wood design. It's nice and light considering its size. Just know the case that comes with it is great, but it's huge. So yeah, if you've got a small car, might not be the guitar for you. But I'm not inherently a huge fan of the Epiphone Explorer shape. I prefer the Flying V, but I could tell just by playing it, this guitar is kind of special. Everything from the big chunky neck, which I absolutely love. Again, it's a better neck than on my Gibson Flying V. They've put USA burst bucket pickups in there, which are my favorite Gibson pickups. And it's absolutely beautiful. The unboxing experience when I got to borrow this from Sky Music was something else. I was really shocked how much I liked this guitar. To the point where I actually considered, oh, maybe I should get one of these at some point. But my Flying V is enough of a weird-shaped guitar for me. But if you've got one of these guitars or you're thinking about getting one, it's really up there with the best of the best. Irrespective of the name on the headstock and all that kind of stuff, don't let that bother you. This is a really beautiful electric, and I don't really see a huge benefit now of buying a Gibson over the Epiphones when the Epiphones are really this good. 2024 was the year I finally got a chance to play a couple of Ibanez guitars in a lefty. It's few and far between for me as a southpaw, but Sky Music had the Ibanez AZES 40, which is a killer Strat-style electric guitar. It's got a humbucker in the bridge and 2 single coil pickups in both the neck and middle position. Now, what I like about this particular guitar is it's got 1 volume control and 1 tone control. Yes, I much prefer this, and it actually looks really cool as well. Now, unlike a normal Strat where you sort of plug in on the front of the guitar, this is from the bass. I can also appreciate that. I kind of prefer it. Not only do these pickups sound remarkable considering the price of this guitar, it also feels so good to play. This felt like a guitar that was twice the amount of money. It's got this beautiful satin finish on the neck. Now the neck color has this almost like yellow butter style finish, and yeah, it's not quite the standard vintage tint. This guitar felt so good to play, and it was really inspiring for me to use it on the jam track. It really kind of played itself, which is always a good sign. This kind of ticks the 3 boxes. It feels great to play, it sounds great, and it's also at a price that will make sense. If you live in Australia, they're around $600, so I'm tipping in the US, they're probably around $450 or somewhere around there. I'll link it below if you want to check this one out, but this is definitely one of the best affordable guitars I've played all year. Let's talk PRS SE guitars. There's 2 on this list. The first one I'm not going to spend too much time on because it's reinvented the wheel, but it's a really nice wheel. It is, of course, the PRS SE Silver Sky. This is a Strat. It's John Mayer's signature version of the Stratocaster with some modern aesthetics and appointments and little differences in the color and all that kind of stuff. But for intents and purposes, it's a Strat, right? And it's a really great Strat to play. This was one of those guitars I thought I would love to hate. And then I played it some more, and I really started to enjoy it. It's very playable. I think when you compare it to the landscape of guitars around the same price, it's easily as good or better. And I'm not saying it's wiping the floor with some of the other guitars around the same price, but it's very close, and it really feels like a more premium guitar. But it looks like a cheaper guitar in a few different ways. So while it does have some really cheap looking plastic, and the joint on the neck and the headstock, that scuff joint thing looks a little bit cheap, and the finish on the back of the neck doesn't look good, it all feels so good to play. It really does. And I didn't think for the life of me I'd be putting this in the best of 2024, but it inspired me to play. The jam track was inspiring. I played it a lot more after shooting my video. I just thought to myself, man, this is great. Now, I've heard some people say, hey, some of the guitars in the early run of these, especially for righties, had issues with frets being too high or too low and all that kind of stuff. I had no problems with playability. It could be also just to the fact that I've played so many guitars over the years that I can kind of make most of them work, but it felt great. I was playing all the way up the fretboard, and I had no problems getting the kind of Strat tones that I love. These pickups have just a really sort of classic Strat vibe, but they're also really well balanced. So whether you're switching between neck and middle and bridge or bridge, they're all kind of balanced. And I really can appreciate that. Sometimes when you switch over to certain positions on a Strat, the volume just comes right down. At least with this lefty that I tested, it wasn't an issue whatsoever. I can also appreciate that they come with a gig bag, and the gig bags are great. If you've ever seen them for PRS SE, then you know what I'm talking about. I've had mine for my PRS SE Custom 24 now for many years, since 2017. It's still going strong. At the end of the day, I'm happy to see some new lefties in the range, and this PRS Silver Sky is definitely a great choice if you're looking for something different. Whether you're a John Mayer fan or not, give one of these a go. Play it, have a listen to it, and see what you think. I'm actually pretty impressed by it. Visually, it might not be the best, but I think playability and tone, which are the most important things, as well as value, I think they're all very strong. The second PRS I'm throwing into this list was one I liked even more than the Silver Sky, and this is the PRS SE Zach Myers. Now, I don't really know anything about Zach Myers. I'm sure he's an amazing player. I tend not to want to look up the artist's that unless I know who they are already, but I don't like to look up the artists ahead of filming my video. I like to just take my own approach with stuff rather than try to emulate other players. So that was kind of my headspace when I reviewed this. I was like, man, this guitar is really something else. And I think this represents the best quality guitar at its price I might have ever played. That's a big statement, but it's right up there. It feels like a $3,000-$4,000 guitar when it's a lot less expensive. So they really got this right. Now, I wasn't the biggest fan of some of the Made in Indonesia initial run of PRS SE Custom 24s and so forth. They just didn't feel as good as my Korean one from 2017. But this is even better than my Made in Korea guitar. The pickups are great. You would never need to change the pickups or anything like that. It's got the nice F-hole design. It kind of reminds me of my Kiesel in many ways, which is my favorite guitar to play. It's just a really beautiful guitar. The only small compromise or difference with it, they've changed the position of the volume control. It's in one of the positions of the tone control, and it kind of makes sense, but it also will take a bit of getting used to. So yeah, you'll go to turn the volume down, you'll be turning the tone control down. I think it's for the bridge pickup. It's kind of reversed. But anyway, this is a really impressive guitar. Again, it comes with one of those killer gig bags, and with the exception of the Epiphone, I would put this kind of almost right there with it in terms of quality. It is really impressive. This next guitar is one I've been using on a lot of videos since it arrived here at the house. Although I haven't been shooting as many in the studio as I normally would for December, this has been so much fun to play, and this is the Vola Oz RV TNC. This is Vola's top-of-the-line Super Strat. It kind of reminds me of the experience I had playing the Sir Legacy at Jerry's Lefty Guitars a few years back. It's a really beautiful electric. This guitar definitely has a few things going for it that I don't see on a lot of other guitars. So first up, it's made in Japan, and the Japanese-made guitars are fantastic. But secondly, it's got maybe the most interesting combination of pickups out of all of the guitars. So you get like a mini humbucker in the neck. It's kind of like a Danny Gatton rail style, or, you know, any other number of brands rail style neck pickup. You then get a single coil Strat pickup in the middle, and then the bridge pickup has a full-size humbucker. But you can split all of the humbuckers. You can also run all three pickups together. You've also got the option of neck and bridge pickup together, like on a Telecaster in humbucker or single coil mode. There's also a button that allows you to say you've got your volume control and tone control on. So you've got your volume at half, you've got your tone control on. You push this button in, and it goes back to full blast. Everything's at 10. So they really thought of everything. It's got a roasted maple neck, stainless steel frets. Again, this is right up there with some of the best of the best. Vola guitars, again, go under the radar. I think a little bit like Reverend. They're maybe not as well known, but they're making guitars that inspire me to play. They're not the same thing coming out every year. They're really doing something different at Vola. And yeah, this was a really beautiful guitar. It came in this awesome hard case as well. A hard case. So while you are paying a bit more for this over some of the others, you're getting arguably one of the highest quality Super Strats you're going to get your hands on. If you're unfamiliar with Vola guitars, I'll link these ones down in the description so you can check it out after this video. This last guitar might be the best value Telecaster on the market, or T-style. This is the Artist Guitars AT53. You might remember Ben came in and reviewed a whole bunch of right-handed guitars that weren't available in a lefty. This guitar is super light. Now, if you know anything about Artist guitars, they can either be light-ish or backbreakingly heavy, and this is the lightest I've ever seen from them. And it's also one of the best quality electric guitars given the price. And I'll link this one down below if you want to check it out. Now, the AT53 has a relic body design. It comes in a few different colors. It's got a really beautiful neck, nice quality frets, all that kind of stuff. So the playability was right there as well. Now, for those who don't know, Artist Guitars is a bit like the Harley Benton of Australia. They're probably made at the same factory. I don't really know the whole story behind that, but they look very similar to some of their other models and vice versa. But this looked very different. It was the lightest tele I've picked up ever, next to, again, the Brad Paisley Telecaster, which is one of the lightest guitars ever. And it just sounded great. It sounded like a really traditional tele. So if you're a tele fan, I can highly recommend checking out the AT53. Over to the best accessories of 2024. So this is like everything other than the big items, I guess. So the first thing I have to add to this are the Vox Amp Plug 3 range of headphone amplifiers. These are really impressive. They're like 30 or 40 bucks, maybe a little bit more, depending on where you live, of course. They might be $60 in some areas and whatever. But these are basically like analog headphone amplifiers that give you a really great selection of tones. And all you have to do is plug them into the bottom of your guitar. use some headphones, and you've got tones from all the classic amplifiers. There's Fender, Boogie, obviously the Vox amplifiers, there's an Orange, and a whole bunch of bass ones as well. Now, I recorded my review video running a line into that and then out into my audio interface, so you could absolutely hear how it was supposed to sound, and they sounded really cool, man. You could use them as a sort of makeshift recording tool if you want to get every amp and you're not a huge fan of digital multi-effects processor pedals, all that kind of stuff. You can definitely make these work, and they've just got like simple functionality, and you can get playing without sort of messing around too much, which is always good. I definitely had a few favorites in that range. I'm obviously a big fan of the Fender tone. The Orange tone was killer. The Boogie was a lot of fun as well, and there's really nice bass tones in there. I usually layer up all the bass parts on my recordings, and that particular one, or the two that I tested that were for the bass amps, also sounded very good. So I think value for money, these are almost unmatched on the market. You sort of have to spend twice or three times as much to get an all-in-one digital solution, which may actually sound better sometimes and give you more options and versatility. But if you're just a fan of an AC30, you can get it, and that's the sort of sound that you'll have. And it sort of saves all the fiddling around, and there's no learning curve either. So these are really cool. The build quality, you know, they're very plasticky, but other than that, I had no problems with them sort of coming out loose on the jack of the guitar or anything. It was all fine. So yeah, definitely give these a look. If you haven't seen that video, again, I'll link that down in the description. All right, let's talk about another set of really impressive pickups. And again, these have been around since the 80s. Dr. Rick put a set of these in his Vola Oz, and they were really just something I didn't expect to sound as good as they did, because as a blues player, around other blues players, not many people talk about EMGs, but I've trusted my ear over the years more and more, and I got to play a set of these pickups in the Sir Legacy over at Jerry's, and they're absolutely stunning sounding pickups. And if you know the great tones of Mark Knopfler with the Sir Pensa electric guitar, then you know how great EMG pickups are. But so many people dismiss them because they're active. And I always thought active pickups would sound too compressed, or they'd lack sort of definition or whatever, but then I played them myself and I thought these are great. Hearing Dr. Rick play these pickups in person made me just go, man, these are so good. Why put up with the buzz when you can get an absolutely rockin' tone out of these EMGs? One of my favorite blues guys of all time, Michael Burks, just absolutely amazing. If you don't know his stuff, look up Empty Promises. He played Strat with two EMGs, and I didn't know that at the time. I'm like, whatever that tone is, that's the sound. And I found out later they were EMGs. And hearing Dr. Rick play them and knowing that they're completely buzz-free and you can throw as much drive on them as you like, and there's all of these different configurations you can get with their pickups, maybe you want to put them in the list because they're really impressive tonally and they look super cool. Dr. Rick, like most guitar players, he can either be right into something, or if it doesn't work out, he takes them straight out. But he's been playing that guitar live more than even his beloved Les Pauls because it's lighter and the tones are really impressive. The last accessory I'm putting on this list, this will just be a quick one, is the Eminence Texas Heat Speaker. Now, I've had one of these for years, but I purchased another one in 2024. I should have put this in the list back in the day, but I didn't for some reason. I don't know why. But this speaker is really cool. If you've got an amplifier that has too much top end and not enough lower mids, this will completely transform the tone of the amplifier, which is why I've always said it's great for solid state amplifiers, and it's also really great for just inherently bright amps or anything that doesn't sound thick enough in terms of its tone. It has a really prominent lower mid hump, which suits amps like the PV Bandit. It completely transformed my Marshall DSL 40CR. The stock Celestion V-type speaker that was in there was just way too bright to my ear unless you had the amp cranked. This makes the EQ a lot more functional. Some people find the Texas Heat a little bit too rolled out, but I don't. And if you play live, it's plenty bright still, but it has a really fat attack on the note. So whether you're playing clean and you want that big clean starting tone, or if you're rocking out on the Carlos Santana channel of the Marshall DSL or PV Bandit, whatever, it's going to sound really impressive. The speaker is one of the most important things in any amplifier. You can have a great amp with a crap speaker, it will sound crap. You can take a very average amplifier, put in a great speaker, and it's going to breathe new life into it. So I can still highly recommend putting a great speaker into your amplifier if you don't already have one in there. Now, the only time I would suggest changing a speaker is if you've exhausted all of your other options. The EQ controls on your amp, some of the most powerful things out there, so give them a go first. But if you just want more oomph and more attack in different ways, this is where changing a speaker will make the biggest difference. I actually had a Texas Heat in my old Mustang 3 version 2 a long time ago. It was a great match for that amp as well. But if you've got a solid state amp of any description, and it's not quite cutting it, or it's got a cheap sort of no brand speaker in there, these Eminence speakers make the world of difference. And Celestion speakers are great as well, Jensen's, all those other ones. But for the kind of sound I like, I've settled on the Texas Heat and the Swamp Thing. Those two pretty much cover all the kinds of sounds I like. It's that time to talk about the worst guitar products of 2024. And this is just my experience with these particular units. Now, always in the comments, I'm going to say, you should make a review of it anyway. Sometimes something's not playable, and I just don't want to sit there and talk about it. And that's what this is for. That's why I save this section till the end of the year. There's always a few items that just don't meet my expectations, or they're not playable, or they don't hold tune, or they're just generally lackluster. So let's get into it. The first guitar I'm putting in this list, while I've praised them in the previous sections of this particular video, is the Artist Falcon in Surf Green. Now, this is a dual single coil pickup electric guitar from the folks at Artist Guitars, and it's arguably their least expensive. It comes in at $269, but I just had a really poor experience with this. Not only do the single coil pickups to my ear sound thin and uninspiring, this thing just didn't hold tune. It also had the floating 2-point tremolo where if you bend, it kind of goes out of tune, but the whole thing was just unplayable to the point where I was changing the strings, I was changing the springs in the back, I was doing everything to try to get this to stay in tune just for one pass on rhythm guitar. And after about 7 or 8 goes and trying everything I could to get this to be playable, I was unable to shoot the video. And I don't just like putting a video out going, this sucks, this is no good. I wanted to sort of give you some context about what problems I had, and whether or not this is a problem for everyone, we'll see in the comment section, right? So this is, again, their most inexpensive guitar. The scale of it was a bit funny, but the tuning stability paired with these two pickups, I just didn't like the tone of it whatsoever. Now, everybody likes different things, and if you love the tone of this and the tuning stability is fine for yours, then that's awesome. But this, to me, would need almost like a hardtail 2-point trem that sits flush to the body. And then if you want to use that tremolo arm, you would push it sort of away from the body. I think that would be the best for this particular instrument. Now, I put aside a full day for the Artist Falcon, and I was unable to get it to be playable. And yeah, I don't love the design of it either, but that's just me. Let us know in the comments section whether or not this guitar's worked for you if you do own one. But for 269 Australian dollars, which is probably like 200 US, you don't expect too much anyway. But based on my experience with a lot of the other Artist guitars, which made some of the best of 2024, yeah, this was a little bit lackluster. The second guitar I have to add to this list, which is kind of like a strange offset body one as well. And it's got nothing to do with offset bodies, by the way, this list. But yeah, it's just coincidence that that happened. This is the Fender Jagstang. Man, I don't know what it is about these guitars, but I just didn't like the tone. The neck pickup, again, just didn't sound very good to my ear. And I hated the controls. To the Jagstang's credit, one of its things that it can do is change the phasing of the pickups thanks to those on-pickguard dip switches. But the dip switches are so sort of like inconvenient if you're a live player. I want to be able to look at my guitar and see exactly where the switching is, and a conventional 3-way toggle switch or even a 5-way would have been better than having these two little things that you have to switch. So if you want to go to bridge pickup, you're going to have to really fiddle around with the guitar, which is something that I didn't really appreciate. And it also felt kind of clumsy to bend. I didn't like the whole experience of trying to play my style on this. Now, if you're the kind of player that might be doing like grunge or something and it works for that kind of style, that's cool. But the tremolo section of the guitar just didn't respond in a way that I liked either. And again, tonally, I found this to be a little bit on the lackluster side. Now, this has its own character, its own sort of vibe going on, but I also just didn't love how it felt on. It felt slightly pushed across on my body if I was playing seated. And eventually I just gave up on this one. The tuning stability was also a bit questionable on this. I think, again, it's because of the tremolo system that's built into it. It is what it is. It's just my experience with it. I'm sure if you play grunge or you're into different styles of music where you might not be playing the same sort of style of music as me, you might get a lot of use out of this guitar. But yeah, it's definitely not one of the best guitars of this year, which is why it's in this category. The The third item in the list of worst products of 2024, I was debating whether or not to put this in here. I was so close to buying it. I'm going to talk about why I didn't buy it, and then reflecting a little bit about what's going on in the community of this particular product. So this is, believe it or not, the Kemper Player. Now, I added the Kemper Profiling Amplifier as the best product of 2024 in terms of the ones that I've purchased. I love it. I think it's awesome. The Kemper Player misses out on a lot of things that the Kemper Profiler does. One, you can't profile your own amps, which I think is a huge oversight. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying if you already own a Kemper Profiling Amplifier, then the Kemper Player is probably perfect for you. I think it's a great little unit in most ways. It's missing a few things, but I think as a one and done sort of like amp pedal, it's definitely not the one to buy. I was debating whether or not I save half the amount of money and buy the Kemper Player or buy the Profiler. And the more I thought about it, and being able to capture my own tones anytime I like, or if Rick brings an amp over, I can mic it up and get the tone of that amp for him and all that kind of stuff. It just made way more sense. And I thought, could I use a Kemper Player for the kind of stuff that I do once I've profiled everything? And the answer is yes, but you also don't get dual XLR outs. And I was thinking, that's a kind of like a no-brainer for anyone doing any type of serious recording, or if you want to use this at a distance away from, you know, your setup. So, for example, if I'm at Jerry's Lifted Guitars, the Kemper Player would be great, but if I didn't already have my own profiles, you kind of limited it to the archive of profiles that are already online, which kind of makes it feel a little bit more like any sort of traditional multi-effects processor pedals. The other thing I didn't love about the Kemper Player is it kind of felt like it needed a screen. The more I used it, I couldn't remember, like, did I put that patch here or here? Sure, you're going to get used to that, but it was just a little too clumsy to use, and this has no impact on the tones. The tones are great. If you've got your stuff profiled, again, from a Kemper that you have, or you find a Kemper profile that you love, you're going to love this thing, but it was just really clumsy in terms of turning or switching between presets and remembering what was there. It's all kind of color-coded, but it just didn't feel like the right thing for me. I think if you're going to pick between the Kemper Player or the Strymon Iridium or even the Boss IR2, you'd be best served with something that you don't really need another piece of gear to get the most out of. I think the Strymon Iridium's probably the best pick out of all of them. I have a really hard time recommending the Kemper Player for anyone who doesn't already have the Kemper head. It's a great sounding unit, let down by not having dual XLR outputs. The user interface isn't great, and people are saying that you got to pay for new firmware coming up or something like that. I don't know how true that is, but that's just something that I've seen in the comment section. But tone-wise, it was the thing that made me end up buying the Kemper Profiler. And if you're someone who wants to profile your own gear, just get the big head. It's definitely worth it. I'm adding in another brand new section for 2024, the most bland, hyped releases. Oh man, so there were a few for me, and this isn't to say they're bad quality or they're not a good product, because they are, but I'm getting really sick of seeing the same guitars come out every year. You know, the same Strats come out every year, the same Gibsons come out every year, or whatever. It just feels like the same stuff is being released time and time again with these minor refinements. And I've said this for years, like, the guitar you have now is fine. It's great to test guitars and want new guitars and all that, but I was really underwhelmed by the whole Player 2 and the Ultra 2 and the rest of the stuff I've seen from Fender. It really just feels like re-releasing the same stuff. And most guitar companies are guilty of this, right? So I'm just going to talk generally about what I'm seeing in the landscape of guitar builders that are sort of household names. I think they're probably the biggest culprit of kind of incremental minor upgrades. Let's just put it that way. And whether or not these incremental minor upgrades will make or break the difference for you, that's up to you. I think the guitars are great, right? If you're going to buy a Player 2, it's going to be an excellent guitar. But I kind of tuned out. I felt like if you don't already have a Strat, get the new one. But if you do, why would you buy another one or buy the latest one when you can buy any number of excellent guitars that came out or might be on the used market and save yourself a fortune? So I've kind of tuned out to a lot of the Fender and Gibson stuff. I'm really appreciating brands that are a little bit different, like Vola or Kiesel, for example. They're making some really interesting stuff, and they sort of refined the design from the stuff I love. So, for example, my Kiesel, it's got stainless steel frets, roasted maple neck. I'm never going to have to do a fret job on there. It's just going to last, and it's light, and it's It's unique in its appearance, and there's nothing wrong with liking the iconic brands. Fender and Gibson are two of my favorite brands, but they're becoming less and less interesting to me, to the point where I've just sort of like stopped reviewing them. I feel like these small incremental updates, and you know, next year we'll probably get the Player 3 and the Player 4. It's just it's a good marketing strategy, I gotta say, and camera companies also do this. I review cameras on a different channel, and they'll have this version Mark II and this version Mark III and so forth. But yeah, I'm just a little bit over it. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I just sort of, I'm starting to tune out from a lot of these mainstream guitar companies. I feel like the fun stuff is kind of like everything else, but let me know what you think. The second and only other item on this could have been in the best of 2024, but I felt like the other things that I listed made more sense for me personally. But just know, this isn't a bad product. I can't really say a bad thing about the tones and its value and all that kind of stuff, but I'm putting it in the most bland and hype releases because this was essentially the same as the prior version. So this is the Boss Katana Mark III. Again, it's a great amp, great speaker quality, great build quality, a good selection of tones, all that stuff. Loud enough to gig with. I've gigged with the 50 and they do the job, and the 100 actually. It just feels like a cash grab because you've got to buy the Bluetooth dongle. And was there firmware available for the Mark II owners that could utilize some of the new tones and features of the Mark III? Some firmware support would be great, even if you had to sort of write over one of the effects that were in the amp that you didn't use to add one of the new ones. That would just show some sort of like legacy support. And you know, it's a bit of a shame, unfortunately, that I've put this in the most bland and hype releases, because when I tested it, it sounded, for all intents and purposes, exactly the same as the version 2, with the exception of that channel. But being, again, that it's a digital modeling amp, they could have brought this over to the Mark II, or given you the option to, you know, rewrite one of the presets like I mentioned before. So again, this amplifier is not bad, and if you don't already have a Boss Katana, get one. But if you've got the 2 or even the 1, question whether or not it's a huge upgrade. But for me personally, I was a little underwhelmed with this. As great as the Boss Katana Mark III is, it just felt like an incremental upgrade. So yeah, food for thought there. Let us know what you think. Up next, we're going to talk about effects pedals, but this section won't be as long as some of the others, I promise. But stay with me. I'm just going to talk about the best pedal of 2024. In my experience, without question, the most unique and best sounding was hands down the Crazy Tube Circuits White Whale. This is a 2-in-1 pedal with a real spring reverb inside, and you can change how many springs are activated to get 3 stages of real spring reverb. So if your amp has a lackluster spring reverb and it has an effects loop, you can run this through. But better than that, you also get 3 beautiful sounding tremolo options on the left hand side. So this kind of gives you the great sounds of like a Fender Super Reverb or even a Vox AC30, where you're combining great reverb with a tremolo effect. Again, this is a real spring reverb. It's not like a digital recreation. Not that I have a problem with that, but they put a lot of love and thought into this pedal, and it's easily the best pedal of 2024. The next pedal I have to add to this list is something, again, that's unique. It's not another Marshall in a box or a variation on that. The Tubesteader Magnezium is the name of this pedal, and if you're a fan of the ZZ Top style tones and blues rock tones, I think you're going to get a kick out of it. While this is kind of like an amp in a box pedal, it's not your typical one. It has no cab sim. If you want that, you can just load it into something else that gives you your cab IR, but you can use it as an overdrive, you can use it as a distortion, or of course you can record with it if you do have a cab sim solution. The build quality is exceptional, and this is right up there with the White Whale in terms of its uniqueness. It's great to be able to showcase some stuff that's just a little bit different. If you're unfamiliar with Tubesteader, I'll link down to my video down in the description box. One of the pedals that was a complete surprise to me personally was the Boss IR2 amp and cab. Now, I tested this not long after I bought my Kemper, and I thought, how good is it going to sound? It sounds pretty good. I still don't like it as much as the Strymon Iridium. I think for just functionality, the Strymon gets the win. It's a bit more simple. All the controls are laid out a little bit better, and it's easier to select the reverb and all that kind of stuff. Whereas on the Boss IR2, it's a little fiddly. You got to hold stuff down when you power it on to get into different modes. It can be a bit confusing. I think most people don't realize there's multiple modes of reverb on the IR2 amp and cab, but there's some of the tones that sound great and some of them that don't, but you can easily just avoid the ones that you don't like and get some really musical tones. And if you don't know what this is, it's essentially a solution for recording. You can just run your pedal board into this and then out into a PA system or into an audio interface and get your tone recorded. It's basically an amp replacement pedal, and it does that pretty well. The functionality is not perfect. I think everything's a little bit too cramped. I'm not a fan of just the overall layout. Again, I prefer the Strymon Iridium, but this is a really good quality unit at a price that makes it probably more appealing than a lot of the other options. The next overdrive I have to put on this list, and it's something I tested again in 2024, is of course the Boss OD3. So we've got two Boss pedals in the best of 2024, and this one is an absolute beast. I had one of these years ago. I haven't played one for such a long time, and hearing it again, it was a no-brainer that this is added to the list. Now, I said at the time, and people didn't understand what I meant, this could be your only one-and-done overdrive. It pretty much covers everything. You can get a nice off-clean tone with it, or you can really crank up the gain and have it work as your lead tone. It stacks well with other pedals, so you can run a boost into it like a Klon or any other type of pedal. It's a nicer sound to my ear than the Blues driver, and it's a little bit different, again, than the Tube Screamer. So the Tube Screamer's got more of this sort of rolled out high and low end thing going on. But the OD3 is a bit more full range, maybe not quite on the low end, but it has more tops. So it gives you, I guess, more of like an amp-like tone in many ways. But it is just a straight up overdrive. Again, exceptional value considering it sounds as good as it does. Another pedal I really enjoyed putting together myself, that's right, it came as a kit, was from Jim Hageman, who makes a great series of pedals with real tubes in there as well. And he's got some internal voltage doubling or tripling that makes the valve actually do something in the circuit, unlike other brands. So it's pretty cool. And he also engineers some really beautiful amplifiers. This one behind me is the Hageman PP12, which I'm a big fan of. But this Klon style overdrive that he came up with, it's basically a Klon with his design. So he's reimagined the circuit board, is my understanding of it. And there's an actual valve in there as well. So it's a good point of difference. And this kit I just put together myself. It comes with everything you need to put it together. That was a whole lot of fun, but more than that, it actually sounds great. It's got top-loaded jacks. Now, a few people said, why are the controls so small? You can actually just buy it with bigger controls. This was the DIY kit. He has a few other pedals in this range which have much larger controls, and if you buy the Klon just as it is already assembled, it will come with those larger controls, which makes a whole lot of sense. But yeah, this is a really great sounding reimagining of a bog standard kind of pedal on most people's boards or radar, whatever. The Klon is the standard. This does sound a little bit different, and yeah, I really liked it, so I'm putting it in the list. While I got to test a whole lot of pedals from existing manufacturers, there was one that I tested from a brand new pedal company out of California, and that is this. This is the Hangman Effects Lord Germfet. Check this out. I wanted to get this out of the cupboard because I thought I'll share this with you. But as you open it, there's a little guy hanging. You'll either appreciate that or you'll think it's crazy. But this is really versatile. It's a dual pedal in the size of a single pedal. So it's essentially 2-in-1. This pedal will give you just about anything. This side over here is our overdrive, distortion, and fuzz side, and the other side is for more of a boost. Now this has a whole bunch of different transistors, clipping stages, all that kind of stuff, and you can make it work for your particular sound. It will do everything from an overdrive to a fuzz to a distortion. It's super versatile, and if you like to even do like country chicken picking, you can dial in that tone with it as well. At the time I filmed this review video, I said this is one of the most versatile pedals I've played all year, which is why it's getting added to this list. For a brand new pedal company to come out with a pedal as versatile as this, I'm really impressed. All right, let's cover the best guitar shops of 2024 that I featured on my Guitar Search Saturday series. If you're unfamiliar with that series, I'll link down to the playlist in the description or up in the cards or something. You can check it out. But I went to a few guitar shops this year which really stood out from the rest. And while they were all fun to go to, and going to any guitar shop is always fun, there's a few that really impressed me to no end. The first of which is the Rock Inn in Perth in Western Australia. Now, Dr. Rick shot an episode for me many years ago, and I didn't get a chance to go until earlier in 2024, and I was very impressed by the shop. Not only do they have arguably the coolest sort of experience in store that you're going to find, it kind of feels like you're walking into an old bank or some sort of old shop. It's got this old school vibe, wooden floorboards, guitars all over the place, and plenty of different guitars. There's sort of like some really unique pieces there, some hilarious guitars, and just some super serious new and used equipment. It is really cool. They've just got a massive selection of amplifiers, and the acoustic guitar selection might be one of the biggest in Australia. It is very impressive. So the Rock Inn definitely lands a spot on this particular list. And again, it's in Perth in Western Australia. If you're from there or you visit it, go check it out. It's a really cool place. It's actually a suburb slightly away from Perth, but it's, you know, Perth's the closest major city. Secondly, I'm going to add Southside Guitars in Brisbane. Now, this is in the state of Queensland here in Australia, and this shop is basically all used equipment with the exception of, I think, a handful of like Reverend guitars or Fender guitars or something like that. But basically everything in this store is used, and it's one of those shops you walk into and it doesn't look that big from the outside, and then they've got like all the guitars kind of lined up almost like a bookshelf. There's just guitar, 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 and it keeps going, and there's so many. I think the thing that made this experience fun for me is there were so many great used amplifiers from the old PV Bandits, the old Fender Mustangs. There were some higher end Engel and Fender amplifiers. They just had basically everything in here, and it was such a fun experience. The owner's such a lovely guy, and the shop itself was just so much fun to go in and test. And they also had a huge range of lefties for, you know, a used guitar shop. Sometimes they don't have many lefties. There might be one sort of, you know, average one on the wall. They had a whole section dedicated to lefties, so that was cool. Acoustics, electrics, accessories, pedals, all that kind of stuff. And they had some really unique guitars, sort of shaped like chilies, and the owner actually made those. And it's just good to see such a good vibe in like a retail shop. This is one of the biggest advantages going to a shop that sells used equipment, because you never know what you're going to find, and it's always a fun experience. And this is Southside Guitars in Brisbane in Queensland. And that wraps up my eighth annual end of year wrap up for the In the Blues channel. I hope you've enjoyed this. A massive thanks to the Patreon crew, YouTube members, subscribers, and anyone who supports the channel. Thank you so much for all the support. I hope you have a great end of year. I've got one other video coming up talking about the direction of the channel next year, because things are going to change. I've been doing the same sort of stuff now for quite a while, and I want to mix it up. So that video will be coming up soon. Again, click the bell, hit all notifications, and you'll be actually notified whenever I post a video. Hope you have a great rest of the year again, and thank you for watching. My name's Shane. I will catch you on the next one. See ya.